Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, the final Mishnah Masechet Shabbat. Says the Mishnah, first dealing with the inyan of Hataras Nedarim. Meifir Nedarim b'Shabbos. You one may meifir a neder on Shabbos. We're referring to a husband may meifir his wife's neder, or a father may meifir his daughter's neder up until the age of 12 and a half while she's a nara. And that can be done on Shabbos. V'nisholin l'nedorim, and one can be shoyel a neder from a chacham. The way that works is that a chacham is told that he would like that his neder be, that he matir his neder, and therefore the chacham says to him, if you would have known something else when you made that neder, would you have made that neder? In other words, he looks for a Pesach, and if he finds that Pesach, then he can be matir the neder. He can take that which was osur to him, and now untie, by matir the neder to the person who was shoyel the neder. That can be done on Shabbos shehein l'tzorech haShabbos, when it's l'tzorech haShabbos. The Mishnah goes on to say, upoikikin es ha'ma'or. One can also close up, he can plug up the chaloin in his window. Here we had a Mishnah in the 17th parak discussing the inyan of poikikin es ha'chaloin. The issue is that, do we say that closing up, shuttering a chalon, a window on Shabbos, is an isser d'rabbanan of oyhel arai or not? We know when it comes to an oyhel keva, it's a tolda of boine, it's an isser d'araisa. But an oyhel arai is an isser d'rabbanan. When a person takes 4 poles and he puts a canopy on top, temporarily getting shade from the sun, that's an isser d'rabbanan on Shabbos, an oyhel arai. But do we say adding on to an existing structure, a tosefes arai, is that part of the gezerah of oil arai? And therefore, can a person be poikik echaloin, take an object that was designated before Shabbos and use it as a pekaka chaloin? So Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah, the 17th parak, says it has to have 2 components, that it's tied to the structure as well as it's hanging down. If it is, then it's part of the structure, and therefore you can go ahead and be poikik the chaloin on Shabbos. But if it's not, it's going to be osir. It's going to be part of the gezerah of oil arai. The chachamim are cholek and say it neither has to be attached to the structure, and it doesn't have to be either. It doesn't have to be hanging either. It can be on the ground itself, and therefore one can take a pekaka chaloin and he can close it on Shabbos. It's not considered to be part of the isser of oil arai because it's not doime to then adding on to an existing structure, because this was used as a pekaka chaloin. So there's no dimyan to an oil arai either. So it states over here, like the opinion of the chachamim, upoikikin es ha'ma'or, one may close up, he can plug up a chaloin on Shabbos. The Mishnah continues, umoidin es hamatlis, it's permissible to measure a beged. We're talking about a beged that became then in contact with a sheretz, and then that beged came in contact with an oichel, the meichel. So do we say that that beged became tameh and therefore it's metameh the oichel? It depends, the size of the beged. If the size of the beged is more than gimel al gimel etzbois, then it becomes mekabel tuma and it will metameh then the oichel. So therefore we want to measure it. Is it indeed gimel al gimel etzbois or not? So it's permissible to then measure this beged on Shabbos to determine if it's then tameh to metameh, if it came in contact with oichel and was metameh the oichel or not. The Mishnah goes on to say, umoidin es ha-mikveh. One is permitted to measure the size of the mikveh, see if it's a mikveh that is kosher. The mikveh to be kosher has to be amma al amma berum gimel amos, and therefore entire 40 saw. So one can measure that to determine if indeed it's a kosher mikveh or not on Shabbos. The Mishnah goes on to say, umaise bimei aviv shel Rabbi Tzadok ve'abba Shol ben Botnis. There was a maase that took place in the days of the father of Rabbi Tzadok and in the days of Abba Shol ben Botnis, referring to whether a person had a house with another house adjacent to him, and in between the 2 houses was a small shvil, a little pathway. There was a person who died lying on that shvil. Now, each house had a gag, a roof, and that was connecting the two roofs was a chavis. The chavis had a breakage in the middle, and that breakage in the middle was above the head of the mace. So there was a concern that the now chavis was making an oil over the mace, which would not only contaminate whatever's underneath where that actual mace is, but it will also go to the houses that have a window that's opened. So the Mishnah goes on to say, "Shepokaku es hamoor betopiach." They plugged the hole of the chaloin, so that they did this before the person died, so that the tumah would not enter the house and metamed the kelim and other things in the house. The Mishnah goes on to say, "V'kashu es ha-mikidei kedo begemi," and they then tied a small kli cheres with a gemi, with a reed, leida im yesh begigis poseach tefach im lav, to determine whether the gigis that had the tear in the middle, whether that had the size of a tefach. In other words, they want to measure it. So they took a small vessel, they measured that to be a tefach, and they wanted to see if it would fit into the breakage of this chavis. Because if indeed the breakage is a full tefach, so then the tumah would then go up and would not spread into the house, whereby they would be unable to then take out the pekak hachaloin, because it will not mitame that which is inside the house. So midivreim lamanu, from their words we learn shepoikekin umoididin v'koshim b'Shabbos, that it's permissible to then make a pekak hachalon, because that's what took place over there. They closed up the chalon on Shabbos before the person died. Umoididin, and they also then measured this small vessel to then see if it will then fit into the breakage of this chavis, to see if it's a full tefach or not. So you can go ahead and measure for a mitzvah purpose on Shabbos. V'koshim b'Shabbos, you can also then make a kesher that's going to be temporary in a way that's going to be undone immediately. And that's why they used a gemi. First of all, it was not muktzah because it's used to then give to animal to eat. And secondly, it would dry up so that it will not be a concern that it will be then left as a knot. So a person can make such a kesher that's going to be immediately then undone. So they only use it on a very temporary basis, permitting us to then be kosher in such a way on Shabbos. The Gemara now goes back to the Mishnah, the Reish of the Mishnah of Hataras Nedarim, and asks the following question. Iboy lahu, hafora ben litzarech ben shola litzarech. When a person is made for his wife's neder, or the father's made for his daughter's neder, that can be either litzarech Shabbos or shola litzarech Shabbos, v'she'ela litzarech in shola litzarech loy. In regards to the she'ela of the neder to the chacham, that can only be done for a neder that's litzarech Shabbos. When we say litzarech Shabbos, it means the neder would be, for example, the person said, I cannot eat, I asked upon myself bread on Shabbos, and therefore it would be litzarech Shabbos because he would need to eat on Shabbos and he would be eating bread on Shabbos. So that would be permissible. If it's shalol litzarech, he would not be able to be shoyel the neder. Umishum hachi kamef leginu. And because of this, the Mishnah separated hafara from she'ela. That hafara is both litzarech Shabbos and shalol litzarech Shabbos, whereas she'ela would be only litzarech Shabbos. That's one side of the shaila, of the question. Or dilma hafara nami litzarech in shalol litzarech loy. Or just like she'ela is only litzarech Shabbos, so too hafara would also be permissible only litzarech Shabbos. V'hod dekapolig lehu bahadodi mishum dehafara ein tzarich bezdin v'she'ela tzaricha bezdin. And the reason why it separated hafara from she'ela in the Mishnah is only to distinguish as follows: that when it comes to hafara, you do not need a bezdin. We said either the husband or the father is mefer the neder, whereas when it comes to a she'ela, that requires a chacham or at least a bezdin of 3 hedyotos. So now we have a question over here. What is the intention? What is the kavan of the Mishnah? Did the Mishnah say that hafara also means that it's shaloi litzarech? You can be made for a neder shel tzorich and shelo tzorich, or it means just like she'ela, it's only shelo tzorich. Toshma, the Gemara brings the following proof: the Tani Zuti the Bei Rabbi's Papa, Zuti taught in the Beis Medrash Rav Papa, Meifirin nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorich haShabbos. One is meifir a neder only l'tzorich haShabbos, l'tzorich Shabbos in shelo l'tzorich loy, only for the tzorich of the Shabbos. So just like a she'ela can only be done l'tzorich Shabbos, so too a hafara of a neder could also only be done l'tzorich Shabbos. Lishna Achrina, the Gemara now brings a different version, another lashon, stating a similar question. Iboilahu l'tzorich atrovayu kitoni v'shelo l'tzorich loy. When it says that it's l'tzorich Shabbos, it's going back also on hafara. That means both hafara and she'ela can only be done l'tzorich Shabbos, but not l'tzorich shelo l'tzorich Shabbos. Alma, in their case, hafaras nedarim me'es le'es. Obviously, when it says hafaras nedarim, it can be me'es le'es. That needs to be explained because there's a difference between hafaras nedarim and she'ela. Hafara, as the pasuk says, biyoim sham'oi. The day that the husband or the father hears, he becomes aware of that neder, he can be made for the neder of his wife or his daughter. By she'ela, there's no such requirement. It can be done any time. So here the Gemara's first tzad is that the hafara can only be done l'tzorich Shabbos, just like a she'ela, because it can be done a full 24-hour period from the time that he becomes aware of the neder. And therefore, he'll have time after Shabbos to be made for the neder. So therefore, it's only l'tzorich Shabbos that he can be made for, but it's shelo l'tzorich Shabbos, he'd have to wait till after Shabbos. Or dilma, or perhaps the second side is ki ketani l'tzorich hashe'ela hu diktani. That which it says in the Mishnah that you can only do so l'tzorich Shabbos. That's talking about the she'ela, but hafar can be done even sheloi l'tzorich. Aval hafar is nedarim afilu sheloi l'tzorich. Alma hafar is nedarim kol hayom. Therefore, we can conclude that hafar is nedarim, according to the second side, would mean that when it says b'yom shamoy, he can only do so and make for the neder until the shkia. So again, there's two tzadim of the shaila. In the second lashon, the first tzad is that when it comes to a hafara can only be done l'tzorich Shabbos, just like a she'ela. And therefore, we can conclude that hafara can be done me'es le'es, a full 24-hour period, whereby we'll say, if it's shelo l'tzorich Shabbos, wait until after Shabbos. The second side, however, says that you can be made for the neder bein l'tzorich Shabbos, bein shelo l'tzorich Shabbos. And that, therefore, is because hafar's nedarim is only till the end of the day, meaning until the shkia, whereby if he doesn't then made for the neder on Shabbos, he will not be able to do so after Shabbos. So that's why he can be made for the neder both l'tzorich and shelo l'tzorich. That's the second side of the shaila. Toshma, let's bring a proof. The Tani Rav Zuti, the Bei Rav Papi. Rav Zuti taught a brisa in the house of Rav Papi, in the Beis Medrash of Rav Papi. Meifirin nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorich haShabbos. One may be meifer a neder on Shabbos only l'tzorich haShabbos in shelo l'tzorich Shabbos loy. Alma, we can conclude hafar's nedarim is me'es le'es. You have an entire 24-hour period from the time you became aware of your wife or your daughter's neder. And therefore, since you have more time, therefore you can only go ahead and mefer the neder that's l'tzorich Shabbos on Shabbos. If it's not l'tzorich Shabbos, then you'd have to wait till after Shabbos to be mefer. Ask the Gemara of Ashi, the Hanan Tnan, behold, it states in the Mishnah, hafaras nedarim kol hayoim. In regard to hafaras nedarim, it's only until the shkia, and there's a kula and there's a chumra. Ketzad? Says the Mishnah, Nadra leile Shabbos, if she made a neder on Leil Shabbos, Mefer leile Shabbos v'yom Shabbos ashetechshach, then her husband can go ahead and mefer the neder the entire night and the entire day until the shkia. Nadra im hachashecha, if she makes a neder before the shkia, then mefer ad sheloi techshach, then he'll only be able to then mefer the neder until the shkia. Because if he was not made for the neder until shkia, it's too late. So here we learn a kula and a chumra. So that since you can go and made for the neder only until Shkia. When she made the neder at night on El Shabbos, he has a much longer period of time to make for the neder, all the way until the Shkia towards the end of Shabbos. And therefore, it's Lakula. But if she made a neder right before the end of Shabbos, before the Shkia, then he only has a small window of opportunity to be made for the neder, and that would be L'chumra. So ask the Gemara, here we see over here in this Mishnah, that you can make for the neder only until Shkia. And yet we said right before that you can make for the neder me'es le'es, 24 hours later. Answers the Gemara, Tanoi, it's a machloikis Tanoi. The Tanyo, haforas nedorim kol hayoim. The Tanna Kama says you can be made for the neder the entire day. That means until the Shkia. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Omru me'es le'es. They say no, you can make for the neder a full 24 hour after you learned of the neder. So here we see the machlokas Tanoim is whether you can make for the neder only until Shkia or me'es le'es. The Gemara now quotes our Mishnah, Nishalim l'nedorim. Ask the Gemara, Iboy lahu. Kishaloi haya loy pnai, or dilma afilu haya lo pnai. Are we talking about you can go to a chacham and be shoel on his neder, even when he had the opportunity to do so before Shabbos? Now, of course, we're talking about being shoel on a neder that is l'tzarech Shabbos. But if he had the opportunity to do so before Shabbos, do we still permit him to do so on Shabbos or not? In other words, let's say he couldn't find a chacham before Shabbos, right? So he didn't have the pnai. Or do we say that if he and therefore that's when we allow him to be shoel on Shabbos? But if he had pnai, he could have found it. He could have gone to the chacham, but he just didn't do so, and he waited until Shabbos. Then he cannot be shoel on a neder. That's the Gemara's question. Answers the Gemara, Toshma, let's bring the following proof. The fact that the Rabbanan made themselves available to Rav Zutra B'rei Rav Zera, V'sharu le'nidrei, V'afagav dahava le'pnai, and they were matir his neder, even though he had pnai to do it before Shabbos. We can conclude from here that indeed you can be shoel on a neder l'tzarech Shabbos, when it's going to be even that you had pnai to do it before Shabbos. Says the Gemara Vayter, now quoting that which we said in the Mishnah, that there was a maisa that took place of two houses and had a mace in between. Shepaku es ha'ma'or b'tafiach, and they closed the window with a small kli cheres. The kosher is ha'mekeda begemi, and then they tied a small vessel with a gemi, with a reed. Says the Gemara to explain this ma'isa further. Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav. Rav Yehuda said to Rav, Hilkiti kitana haisa ben shnei batim. There was a small shevil in between these two houses. V'tuma haisa shom, and there was a mace in between the two houses on the shevil. On top of Kufnun Zayin Amud Beis, the gigis seduka munachas al gabon, and there was a gigis. That means there was a roof on both houses, and in between the roof was a gigis, was a barrel. Now this barrel had a crack in the barrel, and it was exactly above the head of the mace. So before the mace passed away, upakaku es hamor b'tapiach. So the house closed its window. It was poikek the chaloin, because it was concerned that if indeed there's an oil here, then the tumah will spread to the house, and whatever's inside the house will become tamei, the kalim and so on. So therefore, before the person died, they plugged up the chaloin. V'koshu es hamekeda begemi. Then they took a mekeda, a small vessel, they measured that it should be a tefach, and then they tied a gemi, a reed to it. Now, why a gemi? Because a gemi, again, is something that's animal feed, so it's not muktzah, and also it's something that's going to dry up so that it will not be able to then be a knot that will remain. It's very, very temporary. And they tied this to the mekeda, leida im yesham begigis poseach tefach im lav, to determine what will fit into the crack of the barrel. That means if the barrel is wide enough to be a tefach. Because if it is a tefach or more, then the tumah will then go up and will not spread into the houses. It won't be ma'il. it'll go all the way up through the crack. So they want to measure and determine whether was a tefach in the chavis or not. Umidivreim lo manu, the Mishnah says, and from their words we learned shepoikekin. They can go ahead and stop up a chaloin. That's mutter on Shabbos. It's not a problem of oil arai. Umoidedin, and you can measure when you're doing a measurement for the tzarech of Shabbos, what we call shirei Torah. It's mutter. When it's tzarech mitzvah rather. V'koishrin b'Shabbos, and you can make a kesher that's very temporary. That's just going to then be momentarily, it will then come out soon afterwards, and you can do that on Shabbos as well. Ula ikloi lebereish galusa. The Gemara now goes on to say the following. A new Gemara. Says the Gemara weiter, Ula ikloi lebereish galusa. He went to the house of Reish Galusa, he visited. Chazia l'Rabba bar Rav Huna de Yosiv Avna de Maya. Ula saw that Rabba bar Rav Huna was sitting in a tub of water, cold water. He was hot from the weather, and he was sitting in a tub of cold water to cool himself off. He was measuring the tub. Omar lei, Ula said to Rabba bar Rav Huna, Eimor da'amrei Rabbanan medida de mitzvah. When did the Rabbanan say it's mutter to then make measurements on Shabbos when it's medida shel mitzvah, what we call shi'urei Torah? The lab mitzvah mi amor, but if it's not for a mitzvah, so then who said that it's mutter? Omar lei, Rabba bar Rav Huna answered Ula, misasek ba'alma ana. I'm being misasek, meaning to say that since he was bathing and he had no clothes on, and he was in a situation where he did not want to mahar in divrei Torah, therefore he was just simply doing something to then take his mind off the divrei Torah. So he was measuring, but he wasn't interested in measuring at all. He was misasek, ba'alma, and therefore was not an isser. Some explain this to mean because over here, since when it comes to measuring on Shabbos, the whole issue is because mimtzo chefzecha, when you're involved with your own chafotzim, and therefore that's an isser d'Rabbanan. Over here, it wasn't mimtzo chefzecha. He was not doing so. He wasn't measuring for his own interests, and therefore there was no isser involved. Hadron aloch misha hichshich v'slika le Masechet Shabbat. Mazel tov lonu l'kol Yisrael. Amen.